Love, Death, and
Robots
is a series on Netflix my audience suggested I check out, and I'm glad I did. It's a pretty typical sci-fi premise, but done with a new kind of lemon zest on top, where Netflix seems to have given a bunch of different sci-fi short stories a decent budget, some very talented animators, and let them come to life. They are all executed well. It's more just a matter of, is the story worth your time? Now, I enjoyed this for several reasons. I am a big classic sci-fi fan, so seeing a series of sci-fi shorts that felt like back in the old days where they were just like, in magazine short stories all the time, it was a nice take on that version of science fiction. And it's definitely a modernized one because this reeks of younger writers that are just kind of going crazy in all these new directions. And I like that. That's not a criticism. That's a good thing. It didn't feel stale, even though it's using a formula that's been within the genre for more than a century. And I credit that to the fact that Netflix has not capped this at like a PG-13 rating. It is definitely entering that like TVMA territory in nearly every episode. This is not for anyone with a sensitive stomach or a disposition of not watching some incredibly graphic assaults, violence, etc., in shows. This is sci-fi and fantasy just going deep into whatever came into these writers' minds. And I also want to say, for those of you who are fans of animation and beauty, I was very excited in the first couple seconds of every episode because I got to see the new art package that's going to present this story to me. No two look exactly alike, and that kind of really lent to this refreshing taste even after a weaker episode of Love, Death, Robots, to really feel like you're starting anew and give it another shot. Even the weakest episode did not make me want to stop watching Love, Death, Robots. I'll get into my favorite and least favorite episodes here in a minute, but I also just want to hit on some of the better executions of what was accomplished here within this show, and how it's actually given me a bit of respect for Netflix, because this is a risk Netflix took here. This isn't something that you know for sure is going to hold up in, the 2020 TV climate where everyone's just going in all these different crazy directions. No one knows what works. Streaming services are scooping up known IPs left and right because they seem to be the safest investment. None of that's here. This is just Netflix going, these stories are cool. Here's some money. Go. And notice a second ago I said sci-fi and fantasy. I expected this to be hard sci-fi due to what people told me and the name, but there are a couple episodes just sprinkled here throughout that are without question fantasy, dealing with the occult or more just like ghost demon things. And then they have themes that actually, for one of them specifically, one of my favorite ones, bled into more of a sci-fi setting and idea exploration that actually is kind of tied into the fantastical. It was very well done. On every technical level, this show exceeds what I expected. The voice acting, as I've made it very clear, the animation, the pacing of the stories, and the show itself. That sounds kind of counterintuitive with it not being episodic. You're like, wait, how can there be a pacing from episode to episode when they're constantly new? But I feel like they did a really good job of structuring out how these short stories play throughout to really guide the viewer through smoothly. I could absolutely see someone sitting down and just binging these all in a row, and I could see how if you reshuffled these, like stacked a bunch of the longer ones at the beginning, or just had the quality even more front-loaded than it is and just disappointing afterward, they did a good job of knowing where their weaker episodes were, knowing where the length was going to count, and structuring it in a way where you can really get through it smoothly. If you have a queasy stomach, there are a few you might want to skip. I would just probably check online which ones people are advising against, because there's one in particular that just like... But I'm going to go into a little more detail here for episode to episode while still not getting into spoilers. More just talking about the setups and how I thought they were executed. There's 19 in total, so I'm not going to get into all. It's just going to be my favorites and least favorites here. The very first episode is one of the strongest, and I think the creators behind this definitely knew this. Sony's Edge is a great tone setter for Love, Death, Robots. It lets you know what this series is going to be like, with a few in here that are complete left turns that you're not going to see coming and just feel like you're stepping outside the grueling slog of these darker stories to have like a moment of lighthearted fun. Again, that kind of really worked out with how they've paced these apart. But yes, Sony's Edge, I feel like, was one of the strongest. It shows you this is going to be graphic content with things like sexual violence, murder, gore. Nothing's being held back. So I think this actually was probably the perfect pick for them to start the show, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Sony's Edge is about people who are kind of like mentally connected to these monsters and make them fight for, sport. And seeing where it goes, the twists and turns, It's just the most clear-cut, structured example of the general theme of Love, Death, Robots without being predictable or annoying, as some of them get a little bit further down the road. None of them are like horrible. I would say like the weakest they get is like a 4 out of 10, but more often than not, they're in like the 6 to 8 out of 10 territory. This is followed up by another favorite of mine, 3 Robots, a very big tone shift, but was appreciated to also show like there's going to be humor here, because 3 Robots is just 3 robots walking around the post-apocalyptic Earth. There's no humans left, seeing what human life was like and kind of just examining our culture and making jokes at our expense, and it worked exceptionally well. And without getting into spoilers, the big twist made me laugh. It was great. That was another one that I would say is like, I would put this in an 8 out of 10. It's cute. It executes its idea well, while having some more subtle themes that weren't really needed. It's more just a fun sci-fi romp. There's not like this darker thing, but we quickly get into ones that clearly are trying to make a message and point. The Witness is the 3rd episode, and one I want to touch on, not because it's one of my favorites, but seems to be one of the ones that's talked about online a lot, and that's because it's artistic flair. If you're more going to be into these shows for just the art style, this is probably the best example of that early on in the series. If you just want to see that what I'm talking about, how beautiful Love, Death, Robots can be at times, just skip ahead to The Witness and pick this one out. Or you can just like go to IMDb or whatever, where the episodes are ranked, and just watch the ones that are the favorites. But this one might be the most visually striking of the entire show. It just has such an intense pace to it, such an establishment of what the threat is, and the conclusion, well, I saw it coming. It's something that's definitely been done in sci-fi a lot. It's I don't know how else to describe this one except for like delicious in its presentation. It's beautiful in its literal art. Suits, I thought, was just whatever. It's a good execution of a weird idea, but I didn't take anything away from it, and compared to the other ones, its art was really solid, but not extraordinary. Sucker of Souls is where this finally dips into the fantasy realm, and actually was really pleasantly surprised by that. Well, this is definitely a weaker episode. It was just kind of nice to be like, oh, we gonna get some straight up monsters and magic in here? Okay, I can go with some monsters and magic. When the Yogurt Took Over is, I guess by the title, another one that's humorous, but also has more to say than the previous comedic ones. Like that one quite a bit, with how just silly and well executed this silly idea was, and also seeing this total left turn in art style where we had these like realistic or hyper stylized ones. Now just having this story plopped in our lap that's a flat out cartoon was funny and refreshing. I don't know. It just kind of like, I'm constantly with Love, Death, Robots going like, like that is the experience of Love, Death, Robots in bodily sounds. We then have Beyond the Equila Rift, which I think is one of the best episodes. I'm putting that in my favorites. Outstanding, and really, really going into sci-fi horror, which, if you know me, sci-fi horror is one of my favorite subgenres in existence, and this might be one of the best sci-fi horror short stories I have seen. If you want to just try one episode and you don't mind jumping straight into one of the darkest, most disturbing ones, check this out and judge from your own palette whether or not Love, Death, Robots can be your own thing. So for the art one, go The Witness. For super dark, go for this one here, which is number 7. Took me way too long to see that number. And if you want to see what I think is just one of the most solid early on episodes, try 3 Robots episode 2. I think it's just rock solid all the way around. But after the 8th episode, Good Hunting, which I thought was really good, then the quality starts to decline and doesn't climb back up for a minute. There are a few episodes I would just call bad or pointless and boring. The Dump is one of the ones that just slipped down to like a 4 to me. I saw it all coming. It was boring. I've seen this kind of similar story repackaged 1,000 different times. Shapeshifters just kind of reminded me of cringe. I don't know why. I just couldn't take this one seriously. My eyes were glossing over with how much I predicted pretty much every single beat of it, and the conclusion, I thought they mishandled the message they were going for, and it just felt like, this was poorly written and not well executed. Probably the weakest one of the bunch. I would say Shapeshifters is the weakest one of the bunch. Fish Night I found to be another one where I was just like, this is weak, this is not good, I have no investment here, and then it's followed up by Lucky Number 13, where I just this was like, yep, seen this story 1,000 times. Now it's just hyper condensed and kind of decent art. There's also some like weaker arts here as well. The Shapeshifters has just like good art shots, and then there's clearly like unfinished, they didn't actually properly move the model's head here moments. That one is all up and down here. Like number 13 is more consistent. It is striking visually. I would say it's up there with some of the better art of the whole show, but the story itself is just kind of like, yeah, okay, fine. Zima Blue might be the oddest turn this entire series takes. I thought it was really different. Like, this was one of the times where like, oh, not only is the art hitting different, not only is the setup strange, but by the time it's over, I'm sitting here going like, what was the point of that, in a good way, where I'm like, there was something said here. What's it saying? Was this pointless? I don't know. And if you can do that to me, cool. But then we have two more weaker ones right away. Blind Spot, I get 5 out of 10, maybe. The art was alright, the characters are kind of funny, but the story itself, super whatever. It was just basically an action sequence lifted out and put down with a payoff you can see coming at the end, so I didn't enjoy that nearly as much. And Ice Age was jarring in all the wrong ways. Suddenly coming into like half live action, half computer animated. Not the choice I wanted here, and a story concept, and I don't want to buy into this meme, but The Simpsons did it, and The Simpsons did it better. But the show is redeemed with the final 2 episodes. I lied, I did go every episode here because I like this show and it's worth talking about, but 2 of the strongest episodes are right here at the end. One of the funniest with alternate histories, where we basically get to take a look at what happens if has a if he's killed, what happens to Earth if he dies? So that was strange, but very funny and well executed all around. And then again in my like top 3 or 4 favorites, The Secret War, brilliant. I've seen it before, but it's one of the better executions of this concept, and it really, this one kind of was like elevated for Love, Death, Robots. This felt like it was a full-on, huge production budget movie, and they just lifted a couple scenes out of it and put it down, and we got like the last 20 minutes of this movie that were just flippin' awesome. If you want to see just what feels like a mini war epic stuffed into this random sci-fi show, which actually this one's more one of the fantasy episodes again. So if I had to pick a top 3, it's probably going to be The Secret War, Beyond the Equila Rift, and Good Hunting, which I didn't talk about enough, but go into that one without knowing anything and just experience it because it's beautiful. Maybe not like the most impressive artistically, but a wonderful story, and the theme and execution of the idea there is maybe the most solid of the whole show. So those are my top 3. They're definitely worse episodes, and I think people will recognize that. But overall, what I want the conclusion of this review to be is sci-fi short stories are a great thing, and I'm grateful for Netflix for taking a chance on this, and I hope it pays off. I know we're getting another series for this, so that's wonderful. Love, Death, Robots, I highly, highly recommend it if you're interested in any of the things I just put forward here. There is a big content warning, though. I'm slapping over the whole thing, because if you, even like the cartoony or funnier ones will have like graphic stuff happening in them. But go ahead and check it on out. This one, overall, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 with the obvious note that it achieves higher. I would say The Secret War in terms of short story scaling is like borderline a 10 out of 10. And yeah, there's ones that go as low as like a 4, but just skip over them or enjoy them for what they are, which is just like a fun exercise in animation. But overall, thank you, Netflix, for this one, and thank you, audience, for telling me to check it on out. It was worth it all the way through. And man, I am going to have nightmares about Beyond the Equila Rift, or however you say, Equila, whatever. I'm gonna have nightmares about that one because Jesus Christ. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. But have a good one, y'all. Peace.